All right. Welcome back to my high school football championship series for College Football 26, streaming live here on Twitch and later rebroadcasted in what I would call a rerun from back in the day on YouTube at a later date. So thanks again for joining me. We're moving right along with this championship series. We're into week 6 now. So we're getting close to the end. Remember, we've got a 7 week schedule, and then we're going into playoff mode after that. So we're getting close to the end. It's getting into crunch time now for some of these teams. Let me give you a quick recap of last week's action. We had rival week last week, which saw most of the teams playing their very bitter rivals. And it was an interesting outcome because I can't really put a rival into the game this way with the created teams like this. So, in real life, these teams are rivals, but the computer has really no way of knowing that these are rival teams. It just happened to work out to where all of these games were very, very close. So I was pleased with how that came out, and it just turned out to where you just take the records and throw them out the window, as the old proverb usually goes. But as an example, just to tell you the recap of last week's action, here we go. So we had HL Bourgeois going into Terrebonne to play their bitter rival, and despite Terrebonne being undefeated, and despite HL Bourgeois having yet to win a game this season, the final score in that one was 26 to 24. Terrebonne comes out with a very narrow victory in that matchup. So, as you would expect, I was totally expecting a blowout in that one, but turned out a good rival game right there. Then we had Thibodeau facing Morgan City. Morgan City goes into Thibodeau, and Morgan City only had one win coming into this game, and yet we had another close one, 23 to 20. Thibodeau escapes with a victory in that game. And really, that came down to Morgan City had missed a field goal earlier in that game, which was the difference in the score in that game. So a really close win. I think Thibodeau, I think it was tied pretty close at the end, if I remember correctly, and Thibodeau had a late field goal to come out on top. Then we had Ellender going into South Terrebonne, and that one was just a defensive struggle all the way around with an odd score that you don't see in football very often. South Terrebonne comes out with the victory by a score of 9-2. No touchdowns were scored in that game, all field goals and a safety. So total defense on both sides of the ball, but South Terrebonne comes out on top with that one. And then finally, for a final matchup, we had the two Lafourche teams, South Lafourche and Central Lafourche, in another close matchup. And this one, South Lafourche comes out on top with a score of 24 to 20. So again, a very exciting week for Rival Week, and it worked out really, really well. I couldn't have planned it any better than that, to be honest with you. So let's look at the standings now after week 5. These are the current standings as the teams stand right now. And we've got Terrebonne still sitting on top at with their undefeated record of 5-0. Right behind them is South Terrebonne with 4-1, with their only loss so far to Terrebonne earlier this season. We've got Ellender and Thibodeau tied at 3-2 apiece, and that's important because they're actually going to be playing each other this week. So we're about to see a shakeup right there, and one of those two teams is going to keep that top three spot, and the other one's going to drop. Then we've got South Lafourche and Central Lafourche. South Lafourche leapfrogs Central Lafourche after beating them last week, so they both moved to 2-3. But because South Lafourche beat Central Lafourche, they get the tiebreaker, which means they are ranked one spot higher. And then rounding out our 8 teams, we've got Morgan City at 1-4, with HL Bourgeois still sitting at the bottom at 0-5. All right. So that's the recap from last week's action. I don't really think there's much else to go into, so we're just gonna go ahead and get into the game here. I'm gonna pull up the screen. I'll show you what we got ready to go here in just a second, and we're gonna get right into tonight's action. Week 6 about to get started. Here we go.